7:14, I was broadcasting from a big Conservative conference in Washington, and I suddenly heard dogs barking and saw a couple of Alsatians run past and thought, this is not good. And then a chap with a Secret Service badge and a big gun said, you got to go. And I thought, do you know what? When a chap with a Secret Service badge and a gun says you got to go, and when virtually everybody else has been cleared out of the building, you probably got to go. So I did. And Clive Bull, absolutely manfully, stepped in and kept the debate going. But no risk of that in LBC's magnificent studios here in Leicester Square. Well, last Thursday, so a couple of quite dramatic by-elections. The Copeland by-election up on the Cumbrian coast that the Conservative Party won off Labour. And it is a significant result because it's the first time in 35 years that an opposition party has lost a seat to a governing party. By some measures, it's the best by-election performance by a party in government since 1966, which is a long time ago. We even won the World Cup football back then. And for UKIP, Stoke-on-Trent, Brexit Central, as it was called, UKIP's leader Paul Nuttall not able to get over the line. And since then, both parties are having a fairly big public row about those by-elections, about what went wrong. And in the case of Labour, John McDonnell has gone further, and he said that a soft coup has been launched by elements in the Labour Party. McDonnell accuses unnamed plotters and the Murdoch media empire of a coordinated and fully resourced coup. And people like David Miliband are saying the party's in the biggest trouble it's been for 50 years. So I'm going to ask you, between now and 5:30, how would you rebrand the Labour Party? What do they need to do to start winning again? What do they need to do to start becoming a real opposition to a Conservative Party who right at the moment look pretty unassailable? And at 7:30, we'll talk about the rebranding of UKIP. Aaron Banks, big UKIP donor, has written an open letter today to Paul Nuttall saying he thinks the party needs to modernise, to rebrand and change its message. But let's start with the Labour Party. So get involved in this. Let me know what you think. How can Labour improve? Is it just about Corbyn, or is it far, far deeper than that? To get involved, you can call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text me on 84850. You can tweet me on @LBC, not forgetting the hashtag Farage and LBC. And you can watch the show live. Go to LBC's Facebook page now. And I'm going to Daniel in Lambeth. Daniel, good evening. What does the Labour Party need to do, Daniel?
Good evening. I actually think we need to take a leaf out of Donald Trump's hat here, because he's actually done something very clever. It doesn't really matter what's happening politically behind a party necessarily. It's what the perception is of that party and what that person is. And the reality is that Donald Trump played a really, really good game. He got the people believing in something. And I think that's something that Corbyn fails to do. So it doesn't matter, in my opinion, what Labour actually stands for in the background, but if they got the right person at the front of that party, talking about the provenance of the party, talking about what it stands for, talking about the people, the country, and everything that Great Britain was built upon, if they had the right person giving that message, they would be on to a winner.
Daniel, that's interesting. And yes, you're right. A big personality can cover up for a multitude of sins that are going on within a party and its policy platform. Who are you suggesting, Daniel?
Do you know, that is very interesting.
Oh, I thought you had the answer. I thought that's why you'd rung in.
I propose someone else phones in with the answer. Right. I don't have the answer. I have a strategy.
Yeah.
But I think that, as I said, people by people. And actually, yourself, I didn't vote for you, but I really buy into what you say as a person, because I think you actually paint a really clear picture of something. It's not something that I necessarily agree with, but as a person, you did that really well.
Well, and certainly Daniel Trump, who you mentioned at the start of this call, he couldn't be clearer, could he, in what he stands for? And I will, during this hour, tell you what dinner with Donald Trump was like and what sort of form he was in and what he had to say. There's one person, Daniel, who is, I think, putting themselves forward, and that, of course, is David Miliband, who many have regarded as the king across the water. He's been living in New York for the last couple of years, and he's come out today, David Miliband, to say, look, this is our weakest moment in 50 years, and he refuses to rule out running himself. Do you think a David Miliband could capture the imagination of the public?
I think the Miliband brothers were always quite a boring proposition. And actually, when you looked at David, he was the sensible option, but he was more boring, if you like. He's a city boy, and he'd be very well placed at the face of a big bank. And that's as far as I see. It's as fickle as potentially you could have a celebrity who has moved into politics. And I think there is one at the moment. I can't remember who it is, but I'm pretty sure I heard something. And someone else might be able to tell me, or you. Potentially it's just carrying the right message, driving the party out of what is quite a boring Corbyn party that he picked up from quite a boring Ed Miliband.
Okay.
It used to be exciting when...
Daniel, I get it. The whole thing needs a bit of pizzazz, a bit of flair. That's what it needs. Daniel has got the strategy. Labour needs somebody who connects and speaks ordinary and connects with people. Jonathan, in Isha, what do the Labour Party need to do? What can they do? Or is it all over for Labour?
Well, I think they'll pack up and go home, really. I mean, I think they're going to have to split, because they can't oust Corbyn, no matter how hard they try, because he's backed by the unions and 300,000 or 400,000 people keep voting for him. And none of the big hitters stood up when they had the chance. So they put up Angela Eagle and Owen, whatever his name is, to stand against Corbyn. Well, where were all the big hitters then? Where was Alan Johnson? Where was the Dan, what's his name, the paratrooper, or
Jarvis,
David Miliband, Dan Jarvis, or David Miliband, all these people that were serious big hitters, they all ran for the hills. And I think the thought of David Miliband coming back now is a joke, because when they needed him, he left. He has no public support here, and he thinks he'll come back and run the country. Well, on what basis? He hasn't, he's not credible.
But Jonathan, you're talking about the individuals, and Daniel before was saying a strong leader is needed. But how does, and you're quite right, getting rid of Corbyn is very difficult. And if they did get rid of Corbyn, my guess is McDonnell would become the leader, who arguably is to the left of Corbyn and even more niche-y in terms of the support base that he might reach out to. But however good leader of a party is, surely isn't the fundamental problem for Labour that it's split? It's got its sort of North London intellectual socialists, and it's got working class Labour out in the country. How does a leader bridge those two?
Well, that's the whole point. They either need somebody who has such charisma and personality that unites them, and they're severely lacking in that department, or they need somebody strong enough to keep them all in control.
Yeah, not easy.
And they can't do either of those. So I think at some point they will end up splitting. They completely lost Scotland, and all those seats in Scotland. If you look at how many seats would UKIP and you have in Parliament if you had the same percentage of voters to seats available? You'd have
83. 83 is the answer. Yeah.
So the point is, there was all these wards created in Scotland and the north to give Labour a stronghold so that they could be elected in. Well, they've destroyed Scotland for themselves for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so the only way for they have to tear it all up and start again, because if they don't, they are left with something in Corbyn, although passionate and says what he believes. He's unelectable, and nobody else has stood up. The only serious contender, the only person they've got, I think, that has any credibility would be Alan Johnson.
Yeah, but I'm not sure Alan Johnson would really want to do it. And I felt, he's a very nice man, Alan Johnson, but I felt even during the referendum campaign, I thought the strain showed a bit on him. But Jonathan, thank you. But please, if you think Labour actually just need to bide their time and they've got the formula right, please equally do let me know. Your texts coming in. I'm in an Uber taxi hearing your show. David Miliband should take over the Labour Party. He is a sort of Emmanuel Macron that Britain needs, says Alex. Get rid of Mr. Corbyn or get him a new suit, says Dave. Evening, Nigel. You said, how can we rebrand Labour? You can't, because the Blairites are to the left and the right, Paul. I'm not sure about that, Paul, but there's certainly a big left-right split going on within the Labour Party. And Geraint from Formby says, Nigel, you can't rebrand the Labour Party. It doesn't have a cause anymore. The majority of people want aspiration and to better themselves, and the left cannot promote that. Well, Geraint concludes by saying Labour is an industrial party in a post-industrial Britain. So, in a sense, you're saying they're appealing to people who don't actually exist anymore. I think it's even more complex than that, given the North London bias of the main spokesman these days of the Labour Party. Stoke-on-Trent, David, you were at the epicentre of one of the great electoral battles last week. What do you think?
Hello, Sir Nigel. It's an honour to speak to you.
Good evening, good evening. So, Labour held on in Stoke, but only just, yeah?
Yeah, very disappointing. Very disappointing. I was hoping it was going to be UKIP, in all fairness. I suppose the risk is if UKIP had gotten, then this may have ousted Jeremy Corbyn, who's probably the greatest gift to the Conservatives and UKIP. In that he's unelectable.
David, I want to hear more from Stoke-on-Trent, but your line is ghastly. So I'm going to go to Sean in the Wirral. Sean, good evening. What does the Labour Party need to do?
Good evening, Nigel. I think the Labour Party, for me, I think it's got to go back to the days of John Smith when they actually represented the working man, the working class of this country, although obviously they voted it with the middle class, as you know. But Labour is so far detached from the man on the street and the working class people that reportedly represent that I don't think there's anything down for Labour on the current road. Some people talk about Miliband. Miliband he's as much as Tory as Tony Blair was. I can't see that working, to be fair. I really, really don't see where they're going to go.
But it's short in some senses. In some senses, with Jeremy Corbyn, you did at least get a left-wing leader, didn't you?
There's left-wing and there's ultra-left-wing, to be fair. And Mr Corbyn, I think the only people he appeals to are students and himself. Certainly from up this sort of neck of the woods.
I think you're right. I think you're right, Sean. Yeah, he's very popular with students, isn't he?
He is, very much so, yeah. But remember this, from the socialist point of view, they all start like that. They come out of uni, they get some real life experience behind them, and suddenly it changes.
Not looking good, Sean, is it?
No, it's not.
No,
and from being up this end in the north, those days, as I say, the John Smith of this world, etc., from a good Labour stronghold, I would suggest that's where they need to focus. But I have to say, Nigel, I just cannot see anybody on the horizon who's going to step in there.
No. Well, I have to say, Sean, nor can I, and I thank you very much for your call. I want to know, how do we rebrand Labour? Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Brexit. And Conservatives last night rounding on Lord Heseltine, calling for him to be sacked from government roles for disloyalty after he said he will defy Theresa May over Brexit in the Lords. Baroness Patience Wheatcroft.
It's only sensible to say, right, we are now on the brink of taking this major decision and accepting these terms. Do you want to do this?
Lord Tebbit.
Well, first of all, may I deal with that silly comment you just broadcast? I don't recollect, after the referendum in 1975 to confirm our membership, that we had another chance to say whether we really meant it or not.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, making you welcome at over 40 hotels in Europe.
Right, I need to pick up the kids from school.
Let me.
Are you sure?
No problem. I might as well pick up dinner as well.
Wow, that would
And go and get the dry cleaning. And I could drop those bags off at your mum's.
But you never visit my mum.
Oh, come on. I see her loads. She was at the wedding.
Whatever reasons you find to come back, you'll earn Tesco Club Card points when you fill up at Esso. Many happy returns. Participating sites only. Terms and minimum spend apply. See esso.co.uk for details.
I'm Tom. I'm in year 11. I was always getting told off for talking. So I thought about the debating team. Now I'm thinking about university.
I put the debating team flyer in his desk. Was sick of telling him to pipe down. I wanted to put his voice to better use. Now he's thinking about university. I teach year 11. I'm Mr. Corbett.
Apply now and you could get a £25,000 tax-free training bursary to teach subjects like maths and languages. Search Get Into Teaching. Subject to eligibility. Selected subjects only.
Brilliant, I've finally quit.
I feel like I've got my life back. I felt much happier.
It's an amazing feeling when you stop smoking. Experience it for yourself with help from NHS Smoke Free. Our range of support tools, which includes face-to-face guidance from advisors, helps maximise your chances of success. Go online now and search for Smoke Free.
I'm Dr. Michael Zibbins, Senior Clinician at TDC Dental Implants. People have asked whether we really can give you fixed teeth on implants in just one day. Yes, we can.
I was here in the morning about 8 o'clock and I was home by sort of 4 in the afternoon.
In just one day, we'll give you a full set of beautiful teeth fixed in your mouth.
Obviously, I smile a lot more than I used to, and I don't sit with my hand across my mouth anymore.
Around 3 months later, we exchange your fixed teeth for a new permanent set.
To be honest with you, it's the best thing that I've ever done.
It's like having natural teeth.
For details, visit smileinaday.co.uk or call TDC Harley Street on 0203 7334 986.
All of us at QuickFit would like to say a big thank you with Jaffa's Jackpot. Buy 1 tyre and you'll get a £25 MOT voucher. Buy 2 and you'll also get 20% of your next service. Buy 3 and you'll get an additional 25% of either brakes, batteries, wheel alignment or aircon recharge. And buy 4 to hit Jaffa's Jackpot. Money off vouchers on these 6 great services for you, your friends or family, valid for 1 year. QuickFit, it's all about the service. Terms and conditions apply.
I know how to avoid a soggy bottom. I know the name of cinema's most famous white shark. I know all the things you can do with a Maris Piper. And I definitely know the TV show that made this music famous. But I don't know my state pension.
There's a simple way to find out when you can get your state pension and how much it'll be. Search Your State Pension and get to know yours.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
And I'm going to tell you this evening what it was like to have dinner with a Donald on Saturday at the Trump Hotel in Washington and what sort of mood he was in 1 month into the job. But before we do that, we're talking about the fallout from the by-elections last week. Labour losing the Copeland seat. The first time for 35 years that an opposition party has lost a by-election to a governing party, and in Stoke, Labour held on, and UKIP is having quite a big argument in the wake of Stoke as to what strategy they should take. The question for both parties is, how would you rebrand them? But for the minute, we're sticking with the Labour Party, and I have a Facebook message here from Paul Costello, who is advising us all how we can make some real money. David Miliband is Labour's best chance. He's 33-1 to come back. Well, we'll see, Paul. Julie Williams says the problem is Labour have adopted UKIP policies, as have the Conservatives. That's more of a UKIP question than a Labour one. Lee Hollands thinks that Sadiq Khan has got his eye on becoming Labour leader. I reckon for the minute he's probably got enough to do with London, but you never know. And by text, Richard in Chelsea says the Labour Party doesn't need rebranding. It should join the 21st century. Forget Karl Marx and stop singing the red flag. I'm going to ask Steve in Manchester, an absolute Labour heartland, where Labour still holds nearly all of the seats. Steve, do things look good for Labour in the north of England?
Hello, Nigel. First of all, thank you very much for everything that you've done. And it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you. You're my hero, mate.
Well, that's very kind of you. But what about the Labour Party?
The Labour Party in absolute disarray. I've actually voted, I'm embarrassed to say this now, but I've actually voted Labour before now. Won't be voting them again. I'm so embarrassed. I mean, the time when they did the leadership contest and Corbyn was up and I call him Tweedledee, Tweedledum, actually. The other guy, is it Owen Smith? Or somebody?
Yep.
I was like, just sat there listening to the debate, and that Owen, like, yeah, we need a second referendum, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, this is just not happening. Absolute laughingstock. You look at the benches and you think, well, what's going down there? Who can front that now?
So, Steve, what happens? What happens? You've been a Labour voter.
Yeah, I don't know, Nigel. I don't know where to go to now. I don't know where to turn. I mean, the alternative for me now is UKIP. I mean, I'm a great admirer of yourself and what you say and what you know, it's like a lot of logic is involved with yourself. And I don't know, but you're too busy winding down with Trump, aren't you, to front the Labour Party?
Well, I'm having a bit of a rest after 25 years, Steve, and I'll tell you more about that later in the show. Thank you for the call. What does Miles in Northampton think? What does Labour need to do, Miles, or is it on the right track?
Good evening, Nigel. I'm not a Labour supporter, never voted Labour. But in this age of politics, for me, I think it's all about, as you've seen with Mr. Trump, it's the personality, it's the social media, it's the front, the image, and the connecting with the people. Just thinking about Labour, my mind keeps going back to the last coup or the last big challenge that Jeremy Corbyn had. And one thing sticks in my mind. It's a Snapchat picture that spread on social media of Tom Watson in a field at Glastonbury with a pint in his hand and glow sticks around his neck, and then him on the train trying to get back urgently to deal with it. Now, I don't know a lot about him, but he comes across, I watched him this weekend on the TV. He comes across as a straight-talking guy. He obviously connects with the younger voters. He's social media savvy. What do you think is stopping him, bearing in mind he would keep a fair balance with the Corbynistas because he's in that team, let's say, putting in his basic terms. What's stopping him from saying, let me have a go and let me try that angle at the some voters?
Well, I have to say, the last time I saw Tom Watson, he had a pint of beer in his hand too. He does have personality, of that was no doubt. He has rather got himself involved in one or two conspiratorial things, all sorts of allegations of terrible sexual behaviour by MPs, paedophilia even going back years. He
possibly, which would give him even more, given the way the things have materialised in the press, that would give him more of a support, because he was challenging those, wasn't he?
He was challenging them, but it turned out, actually, Miles, to be a lot of old baloney, didn't it? Some bloke called Nick, who made a series of allegations against virtually everybody that had been in Parliament in the 60s and 70s. So I did sort of slightly question his judgment in sort of almost being the self-appointed witchfinder general in the House of Commons. Miles, one thing I will say about Tom Watson, politics aside, he does have personality. And one or two callers that have come through so far this hour are saying that Corbyn just doesn't reach out, just doesn't have the big persona. So, Miles, he may be a possibility, although the press, I suspect, tomorrow will be speculating more about David Miliband. But a previous caller said he looks like the sort of chap that should be running a bank. I once said that, to the president of the European Union. I said he looked like a low-grade bank clerk. That got me in trouble. Miles, I'm not sure, Miles, but clearly you're of the view that Corbyn's not the man. Would that be right?
100%.
100%.
He's a dead duck, and there needs to be some action. There will have to be, because you talk about splits, and callers are talking about splits. They can't let that happen for the sake of their history and the sake of their chance of running. So something needs to happen. It needs to happen now. But I just have a feeling that it may have to come more from inside the Corbyn camp rather than externally, because they have support.
OK, Miles, very interesting. Alan Pryor on Facebook says Labour are not the party of the British working class and haven't been since Kinnock or John Smith, second person tonight, that has said that. Liz says on Facebook, Corbyn should have been more honest and come out for Brexit during the referendum. At least then, Labour Party supporters would have understood what the Labour leadership believed in. Liz, I have to say, I do rather agree with that, because ever since 1983, all through that very long parliamentary career, he, with Tony Benn, the late Tony Benn, opposed everything to do with European integration. Along comes a referendum, and he supports the Remain campaign, albeit somewhat limply. A text here that says Labour should unite with the SNP and Plaid Cymru. Well, maybe what's going to happen is Labour's going to split, and a wing of it are going to join up with the Liberal Democrats. Stranger things have happened. For Labour to start winning again, they need to start with prioritising the interests of the people of the country instead of immigrants and the rest of the world. That's exactly why the SNP are winning in Scotland and Labour doesn't have a chance. My family have voted Labour for decades, but never again. No leader can rectify for the lies and deceit of the Blair years. What does Yuri in Brighton think of Labour's dilemma?
I think it's not about which leader they're gonna select. It's about how they're gonna pass on, picking up a number of points which people can actually understand and relate to, rather than giving a very generalized message of we're gonna make the world better, and people ask them how are you gonna do it, what you're gonna do, and they just don't give the answer. I think once they sit down and work at least 10 points on both internal and external politics, which are clear, concise, and people can relate to, I think this will be a good start for Labour to rebuild itself and get that support that they've lost.
But Yuri, are they a party of Hampstead and Islington, or are they a party of, Leeds? I mean, isn't that the basic problem here, that you've got this huge split within the Labour Party, I've used geography as an example, but, the kind of things that Islington Labour talk about, namely saying how ashamed they are that people would dare put the Cross of St George on the back of their white van or on their house, and that, nuclear disarmament is an absolute priority. And these are things that in Leeds just aren't being talked about, Yuri.
Well, I think you're right in there. It's like a very spread message which doesn't actually make any sense to people. Like, pick out your points, get together behind the points, sit down, spend a month talking somewhere behind closed doors and pick out 10 points for internal politics and external politics, the ones that make sense to people. If people would say, like from Blair era, who would, somebody says jump in Europe or in America, they say how high,
Yep.
If they don't disagree with having politics for helping people, they just want to jump to whoever tells them jump, they can leave.
So do you think, Yuri,
to get the message straight?
So, Yuri, you think it needs just good, common-sense policies, yeah?
Yeah, something that people can relate to and not generalize, like, I don't know, get rid of any new PFIs in hospitals, take control of rent, make it down to at least European levels. That's what people can understand.
Yuri, you may be right. You may be right, Yuri. A good policy platform that people identify with, I get it. Maybe with a different leader, I don't know. I thank you for your call. Either way, my own view is they're in real, terrible trouble. There is a massive, massive split. After the news, I want your calls on how you would rebrand UKIP. Or perhaps it doesn't need to be rebranded, though probably after Stoke, the debate about rebranding it will go on. And stay tuned, as I'm going to reveal what it was like to have dinner with the Donald. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bhatia.
Sir John Major is urging Theresa May to inject a little more charm and a lot less cheap rhetoric into Brexit negotiations. The former Prime Minister is accusing what he calls Brexit cheerleaders of showing utter contempt towards those who voted Remain. Labour says questions must be answered after more than 500,000 NHS medical documents were mislaid. The Health Secretary says there is, though, no evidence that what happened led to patient harm. And Donald Trump is proposing a $54 billion increase in defence spending as part of his proposed budget. The US president is calling for a programme of cuts to help fund the changes. LBC weather. Showers in many parts into the evening, a low of 0 Celsius. Staying unsettled tomorrow with rain possible through the day. Breezy, a high of 10 degrees.
LBC Travel, good evening, I'm Andy Lake. Well, a couple of road closures to be aware of tonight, major ones as well. The A3 will be closed southbound between Ockham Park and Cathedral Turn in Guildford for roadworks between 10pm tonight and 6am tomorrow morning. The M3 will also be shut from 8pm tonight for works between Junction 2 for the M25 and 4A for Farnborough. That's a long stretch of road. The diversion route, of course, via the M25 to the A30 and then along the A327. Peckham High Street closed eastbound at Clayton Road because of an accident which is causing queues back into Camberwell. In Derbyshire, the M1's crawling northbound near Sheffield between junctions 30 and 31 as emergency repairs have closed the outside lane. In Norfolk, the A47 is closed eastbound between Norwich and Great Yarmouth because of a collision. That's causing nasty delays. And in Cumbria, the M6 down to just 2 lanes from 3 southbound after a fuel spillage just before junction 41 for Kettle, that's causing bad queues as well. Onto the tubes, because of a signal failure at Barking, the Hammersmith and City line is suspended between Moorgate and Barking, with minor delays on the rest of the line there. Also severe delays on the District line and on the Circle line. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
A new Vauxhall Vivaro comes with 4 years 0% APR representative, up to 4 years warranty and 4 years servicing and roadside assistance. It's easy to drive, easy on the wallet and even easier on the eye. That leaves you free to do more of what you do best. Less getting the van sorted, more getting the job done. Search Vauxhall Vivaro. Conditional sale. 4 years 0% APR representative. Minimum 20% deposit plus VAT at 20% on total price. Financed by Vauxhall Finance. Subject to status 18+. T's and C's. Mileage limitations and exclusions apply.
Did you know premium bonds have been around for 60 years? I recently won £100 in the monthly prize draw. I was off to the bank to deposit my prize warrant when my granddad came over. You know you can do all that online nowadays, he chuckled. And he was right. I now manage my premium bonds online. And I've chosen to have my winnings paid straight into my bank account. It's so much faster. You can too by visiting nsandI.com. Premium bonds, making people smile for 60 years.
eBay has every kind of part to help your car pass its MOT.
Son,
come and have a look at the car. There's a few things I've fixed ahead of its MOT. I've topped up the washer bottle.
Screen wash?
I've replaced the wipers.
Windscreen wipers?
I've sorted the indicators.
Light bulbs?
And press that.
Horns. Shop eBay's unbeatable selection of parts and accessories to help you get your car MOT ready. The ultimate pass your MOT first time shop.
Tonight on ITV.
My name's Ellie. I'm a detective with Wessex Police. You called about an attack?
David Tennant and Olivia Colman are back for one last case.
We will find the man who attacked you.
That will push them right to the edge. New suspicions.
Promise me you had nothing to do with what happened to Trish.
New suspects.
I am not a violent man.
And a secret that refuses to wash away.
I'm scared he's going to do it again.
BAFTA award-winning drama, Broadchurch, the final chapter, tonight at 9 on ITV.
Do you have a property investment business? Are you affected by the upcoming taxation changes for buy-to-let investors? If you think you are, or that you might be, act now. Speak to the specialist property accountants at Barnes Rofe and arrange a no-obligation review and get expert advice you can trust. Barnes Rofe. Clever accountants for property businesses. Visit barnesrofe.com/radio.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag #FarageOnLBC.
Whilst we debate those by-elections last week and the turmoil in the Labour Party and indeed in UKIP, today Sir John Major has resurfaced his first speech since the referendum of last year when he urged us to vote Remain. And here is what Sir John Major said today.
Behind the diplomatic civilities, the atmosphere is already sour. A little more charm and a lot less cheap rhetoric would do much to protect the interests of the United Kingdom.
Oh, I've just fallen asleep there, sorry. Anybody suffering with insomnia problems, don't take the tablets, just keep replaying the John Major speech at Chatham House today. It should do the trick. More endless negativity coming from those Conservative politicians of that era. Major, Heseltine. I think we should just put them all in the Natural History Museum. So UKIP expected to win Stoke, wanted to win Stoke. I have to confess, I thought they would win Stoke. It was a tough and difficult campaign. Labour held on, UKIP was second, and the Tory vote held up remarkably well. Does UKIP need a rebrand? Well, Aaron Banks, who's been one of the big donors to UKIP, has today written an open letter to Paul Nuttall, UKIP at a crossroads, and he says that UKIP needs to make him chairman, to bring in a CEO from industry, to totally rebrand the image of the party, to professionalise it, to put it online, very much like the Five Star Movement is in Italy, and in terms of policy, to make sure that it's absolutely clear that it owns issues like immigration. And that's been one of the big debates that's gone since the referendum. There are some in UKIP that advocate that we shouldn't talk too much about immigration. We should actually, in style and in tone, be a bit more like the other parties. I don't take that view, and indeed I spoke at the Spring Conference a couple of weeks ago, and I said UKIP is a radical party or it is nothing, and that is very much my view. And I don't like to see my party being dragged through the newspapers and disagreements being aired, but it's an inevitable part of politics. I wonder what Jeff in Redditch thinks of UKIP's dilemma.
Well, I think the first thing that came across to me, Nigel, was that the candidate seemed to be assuming that he'd automatically going to win the seat because of how Derby had voted before, so Stoke had voted before. He also seemed to me to come across as being a person that being less than honest, which I don't think is a good thing for a politician. And the other thing that seemed to me, he's somewhat politically naive because he accused the other parties of a sort of smear campaign. Well, politics isn't exactly a pleasant business from my experience. And if you assume everybody's going to play nicely, then you must be in Cloud Cuckoo land as far as I can see.
So, Jeff, you're saying that you think trust in the candidate was a big problem in Stoke, yeah?
I do.
OK, well,
I do.
He did have a very rough time And for years, I mean, I'm going to say this in his defence, Jeff. For years, he'd volunteered and wanted to work with the Hillsborough survivors groups. But at no point did they ever want Paul Nuttall to be a part of it. And one can only assume that is purely party political. So that issue they raised, Labour, was he at Hillsborough or not? I think that wounded him terribly, even for it to be suggested that he wasn't there. And then it appears that a press officer on his website has written he lost close personal friends. When, as he said, he lost people he knew, but not close personal friends. And Jeff, I personally think, and yeah, I get your point, politics is a rough game, but I personally think, Jeff, he was lured into a trap by Labour that left an impression that perhaps he was less than honest, which I don't believe is fair, but it may well, Jeff. You may well be right. That may be what didn't help the vote.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the other thing that he needs to consider as the leader of the party is where he's going to position the party in the future. My view is that Theresa May has taken over part of the UKIP territory.
Yep.
And is running that quite well. Thank you very much indeed. The part where she seems to be falling down is on the simple little things like the NHS, like housing, like education, immigration. And it just strikes me that you can be a watchdog watching what's going on with the Tory party, whilst at the same time positioning yourself to be taking some notice of what people are saying. And the thing I can't get through is there seems to be a total disconnect with our parliamentary system and London and the rest of the country. Nobody seems to want to tell the truth anymore. And the reality of it is nobody ever wants to come forward and tell you can't have what you want because we can't afford it. And it seems to me until a party can actually come out and say, this is what we can do, this is what we can afford, this is where we're going to get the money from, nobody's going to go anywhere because I can't see that the people who voted to come out of the EU actually are going to be conned in the future.
No, well, Jeff, I think that's right. Those that voted to come out, despite everything, they know their own minds. And Jeff from Redditch suggesting that straight talking is what UKIP needs, and perhaps the other parties too. I wonder what John in Formby and Lancashire thinks. What should UKIP do, John?
Well, just part of the strategy, I think, is to clamp down on immigration because no one else is going to do it. There's also another area which could be very profitable for UKIP, and that is crime, because the big parties are soft on that. The sentences that are coming out of the courts are a joke, and a lot of the time cases never even get to court. They're let off with cautions. So there are two big areas that they can attack.
Yes, well, John, I'm going to say this, that there are some in UKIP, like our Member of Parliament for Clacton, Douglas Carswell, who find discussion on the immigration subject embarrassing, awkward, not the sort of thing that gets you invited to the right dinner parties in Notting Hill. I think the other parties don't even want to discuss the subject, and however strong Theresa May sound on Brexit, just look at the fact that 74,000 people came to this country last year from Romania and Bulgaria alone. And John, I think UKIP should be unafraid of owning the immigration issue with a bit of law and order as well. So, John, I think you're in the right direction. I don't think UKIP should be afraid of criticism. I tell you what, I never was, John, was I?
No, absolutely not. You should be prosecuted for cruelty for second-hand bank clerks.
Well, I did apologise after that speech if I'd caused offence to bank clerks anywhere in the world. John, I thank you very much for your call. Your text and tweets, Nigel, do you agree that UKIP should assert itself as part of the wider identity movement that is spreading across Europe? Phil, actually, the wider identity movement is spreading across the entire Western world. That is what 2016 was all about. It was about the reassertion of the nation state, and I believe, Phil, it's going to continue throughout the rest of this year. There may be some very big surprises coming from the establishment from Europe this year. Nigel, I voted UKIP here in Scotland, but I'm sorry to say that I have no confidence in Paul Nuttall. He's not getting himself out there enough. Andy and Falkirk, when you become the leader of a political party, you always get criticism. I'm very much of the view that Paul had, a nightmarish time in Stoke, but he will regroup, and I think he's got what it takes. I really do. Nigel, rebrand UKIP, the Brexit party. It will keep the pressure on, and it will invite voters to vote and push for Brexit. It'll also get you new members in the process, says Clive from Worsley in Manchester. And a tweet, UKIP need to move away from the centre ground and become brave and radical again. Cull those trying to turn it into Tory light, says Helen. Well, Helen, I don't know. You may well be right. What does Rhys in Lambeth think about UKIP? What should UKIP do, Rhys? Should it now be soft and cuddly and appeal to people who work at the BBC? Or should it be a radical party?
Hi, Nigel. I just want to say thanks. Honoured to speak to you. Without you, you wouldn't be having a referendum. So thank you. You're an inspiration. I think UKIP actually should go back to its original roots of being a small state libertarian party. I very much liked when you were leader, for many, many years back, emphasising things like small state, low taxes, getting the deficit down, getting the debt down, things like emphasising our traditional freedoms, non-interventionist foreign policy. I feel as though UKIP's sort of maybe going a bit towards maybe sort of, I understand in the north it's hard to talk about small state and not really having public services, but that's where UKIP was very, very central and radical on, and I think that's where UKIP should go back to.
So, Rhys, is UKIP now focusing too much on getting Labour votes at the expense of everything else? Is that basically what you're saying?
I think up north, yes. I mean, down south, you can maybe talk about cutting taxes and getting rid of the smoking ban and getting out of maybe Afghanistan. But I don't know, maybe in the north it's more sort of Labour-light, perhaps. And I get it, you need to win seats in the north, and, you know, I'd like you to win more seats. I personally would have voted for UKIP if I was in Stoke, because my party, the Libertarian Party, wasn't planning a candidate there. So I would have voted for you guys. Yeah, I think that's what they're doing, yeah.
All right. No, Rhys, I get what you're saying, and, you know, whilst it was disappointing for UKIP, it's certainly not the end. I remember as leader being written off time and again. We were told the UKIP fox had been shot. It must have been extinct the number of times they said it, and none of it was true. I'm going to tell you what was on the menu when I had dinner with Donald Trump last Saturday. I'll reveal all after this, but right now you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
A Conservative MP has apologised after claiming disability benefits should go to really disabled people, not those who are taking pills at home. Do the rules need reforming?
Clive Bull on LBC.
I'm Tom. I'm in year 11. I was always getting told off for talking, so I thought about the debating team. Now I'm thinking about university.
I put the debating team flyer in his desk. Was sick of telling him to pipe down. I wanted to put his voice to better use. Now he's thinking about university. I teach year 11. I'm Mr. Corbett.
Apply now and you could get a £25,000 tax-free training bursary to teach subjects like maths and languages. Search Get Into Teaching. Subject to eligibility. Selected subjects only.
All right, Steve. You're looking well.
Yeah, well, I'm lifting a lot more.
Working hard. Looking good, eh?
Yeah, and business is on the up.
Oh, so what brought all this on?
Well, she's Italian.
Nice.
And large, actually.
Well, there's a lot to be said for
She can carry a lot, too.
Right. She's a van, isn't she?
Save up to £13,000 off list price at the Fiat Professional Knockout Sales Event. Hurry, this offer must end 31st of March. Get down to your local dealer now. Terms and conditions apply. Saving refers to discount on all Ducato long wheelbase models from 27545, excluding VAT at 20%, delivery and RFL. Visit fitprofessional.co.uk for more information.
What if someone else did all the donkey work to find out if you had PPI for free? Well, that's exactly what we do here at the Claims Guys. Just text EASY to 60777 and we'll do the digging to discover if you ever had PPI added to one of your accounts. After that, you can pursue the claim yourself or ask us to do it for you. It's your choice. But if you don't text EASY to 60777, you'll never know. The Claims Guys, the PPI people.
The Claims Guys. JustATrader.com.
Washing machine on the blink? No problem. Just shower your clothes on. Job done. And you'll smell like coconut cream. Or get yourself on trustatrader.com and find the right person to do the job for you. Pop in your postcode and the trade you need, then you can choose from loads of tried and tested tradespeople in your area. Reviewed, reputable, right good tradespeople. Visit trustatrader.com.
JustATrader.com.
In this country, on average, someone dies from accidental carbon monoxide poisoning pretty much every week. You can buy a good alarm from any DIY store. Don't be a victim of the silent killer.
eBay has every kind of car part for everyone from beginners to the real experts.
Well, that should stop them squeaking.
Brake pads.
And that's the engine sorted.
Motor oil.
And that's the handling taken care of.
Alloys and tyres.
And that means I've saved myself a few quid.
12-foot snooker table for the spare room. Shop eBay's unbeatable selection of car parts and accessories. The ultimate fix the car like a hero shop.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
UKIP donor Aaron Banks wants a complete rebrand of the party and wants the party to be radical in its politics. And Paul Nuttall, recently taken over as leader, didn't win in Stoke, has got some very tough decisions to make. That's what leadership is all about. Karen Gerard on Facebook says UKIP needs another dynamic leader. Well, Karen, give this one a chance. He's been there just a few weeks. It's not easy. But what does UKIP need to do? The Tory party are now talking about Brexit, meaning Brexit, and that makes it harder for UKIP. Though arguably, in 2 years' time, if they haven't delivered it, then actually it might be very easy to get voters to vote for UKIP because they'll feel, frankly, they were diddled out of the referendum result. What does Di in Bletchingley think that UKIP should do right now?
Hi, Nigel. I think a new slogan for UKIP would be "Buy ours, not theirs." It's something that has been done in the past, but I don't think we should say "Buy British." Let's say "Buy ours, not theirs." It's something we need to do, because we need to boost our own industries and our own agricultural production and so on. And I think it would fit well with the UKIP idea of patriotism as well.
Jim Callaghan did this, didn't he, in the late 1970s, the big Buy British campaign.
Yeah, it was Margaret Thatcher who did it as well, I think. But we needn't say that.
Well, Di, what you're saying, actually, what you're saying is exactly what that man across the Atlantic is saying.
Yeah.
He's saying, buy American, build American. Yeah. You know, when he decided to give that pipeline the go-ahead, and he asked, well, where's the steel going to come from? And they said, Mr. President, from all over the world. He said, oh no, it isn't. It's going to come from America. So you think a Buy Ours campaign could be just what UKIP needs, yeah?
Yeah, Britain first.
Britain First, unfortunately, has some connotations that are deeply regrettable. If you want to go and Google that in a minute, you'll be a bit shocked you said it. But I understand the motives behind it. A new Buy British campaign, says Di in Bletchingley. Well, I haven't got a problem with that at all. Thank you. And what does John in Boston, in Lincolnshire, think UKIP needs to do? And interestingly, Boston, one of UKIP's strongest areas in the country.
Nigel.
Yeah.
Hello. When I met you several years ago now in Boston, I was fully behind you and UKIP. Sadly, I have to say, I am now fully behind you 100% still, but I find that I cannot any longer back UKIP because of the people that are involved in it, even though at times it's been said that they would be moved on, got rid of, Neil Hamilton, Steve Crowther, Douglas Carswell, and sadly I have to add Paul Nuttall's name to that, and I don't feel they fit. What I want to suggest to you is the way forward, with you at the top, you be the leader, and let's have Aaron Banks as the chairman and start a whole new party, and you don't let anybody in, any corruption in, from outside.
Well, I get the point about corruption. No political party needs that, John. The prospects of me coming back to lead UKIP...
no, I'm not talking about UKIP. Start a new party.
Oh, so hang on, John. I spent a quarter of a century of my life trying to take this tiddly organisation.
Yes, I realise that, but these others have spoiled that, so start a new party. You've got Aaron Banks with you. You and him would make a good team. Get on with it.
John, I can't think that anybody has ever made a more depressing proposition to me in my entire life. I'm nearly 53. I'm not doing it all again.
Not as old as me, get on with it.
I tell you what, John, starting a new political party is a very difficult thing to do. Very tough to get the voters to identify with it. And UKIP...
I find you had an awful lot of backing because there's a lot of people doing the same as me and walking away.
Well, John, I think before anybody should contemplate a new party, UKIP needs to work itself out, and I believe it will. John, I thank you for your call, but not for your suggestion. On Facebook, Steve Law says there should have been a more professional approach in the Stoke debacle. UKIP needs to be more radical and smarten up, not scoring own goals. UKIP needs to be a radical alternative to the old, out-of-touch political parties. The party would be nuts to ignore Aaron Banks's offer and advice. I'm not sure Mr. Carswell would agree with that. But, of course, these differences happen in all political parties. But I think right now, for UKIP, this is a pretty important moment. Robert in Basildon. Are you a UKIP voter, Robert?
Yes, I am, Nigel, and a great fan of yours.
Right, and how do you... I mean, which way do you want UKIP to go?
Well, I want them to concentrate on the policies, what will affect the working man, basically. There's awful lot of people now, when they look at the Labour front bench, people like Ian Abbott, Long Bailey, Jeremy Corbyn, they just can't see, especially, there's a lot of people up north, they can't see they've got anything whatsoever in common with them. Theresa May obviously has taken a lot of the UKIP votes with a load of promises about Brexit, but I think in 2 years' time, I think people will be shocked. I.e., the latest immigration figure is around about 300,000. That's the size of the city of Newcastle coming into our country every year, putting a lot of pressure on our hospitals, a lot of pressure on our schools, and God knows what. But what I never hear UKIP mention is not only 300,000, it's 600,000 gross. 300,000 of our citizens going over.
Yes, I mean, the actual change in demography, the change in the population is much bigger every year, Robert, than the simple net figure suggests. And I get that, completely. So we need to focus on immigration, Robert. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
And the other thing, I honestly believe, people like Paul Nuttall will be pushing for proportional representation. When you consider that 4 million people voted for UKIP and we get one in the House of Commons, and just a couple in the House of Lords, which is an unelected body, which is another thing I think UKIP should mention. 800 people sitting there, never been elected. Yeah. It's just disgraceful. And I think if you can approach and make things attractive for the white van man who reads the Sun with respect to these people, they're simple folks. I've heard Paul Nuttall mention about bringing back hanging for child killers, and I truly believe that would go a long way to help UKIP. But what I can't understand, Nigel, is why Paul Nuttall, how he conducted himself in Stoke with his website. Surely someone in his ranks must have said to him, look, the big political machines are going to come at you. You've got to sort your website out.
I think, Robert, Paul would agree that side wasn't professional enough by a long chalk, and he knows that, and he paid quite a big price for it. Robert, I thank you very much indeed. I wonder what Burkhan in Clapham thinks UKIP needs to do.
I think UKIP needs to take Darwin's theory of evolution and evolve from monkeys to humans. Stop putting squares through circle holes.
Right.
Start acting like politicians, especially in Paul Nuttall. Especially Paul Nuttall. Maybe he should try claiming he was at Hiroshima next, I think. Maybe. I don't know.
All right, Burkham, it's really, really very, very highbrow level of debate we're having here. Anything else to say?
Yes, I think the same people funding your party are the same people destroying this country. Tax dodgers, the wealthy, who claim they are here for the working class people, but no one but themselves. And I think you, Farage, along with Trump, are the biggest frauds in Western politics.
You're a star, Burke, and I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Isn't that lovely? Isn't he a charmer? You never know. He might be in the same pub as me later. Who's to say? What does Peter in Maida Vale think?
Yeah, hi, Nigel.
Good evening. What has UKIP got to do?
OK, how do we achieve fairness in society? Well, let people have a fair say, as they did in the referendum.
Yep.
PR has not really been resolved yet. So the Fair Representation Party, that's what they should change the name to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think in the future, OK, online voting will allow instant referendum. We can choose where our tax money goes. I mean, we'll be able to vote instantly, cutting out the MPs, ultimately, if you think about it. They're not going to like it because turkeys don't vote for Christmas, but what do you think of the idea?
Peter, I like it. I think more direct democracy would be a very, very good thing. Whether I don't agree with everything in Aaron Banks' open letter, but the idea that UKIP becomes a little bit like a five-star movement in Italy with huge involvement for its membership by voting online and by broadening the idea that we should have referendums on key issues. I think it's a great idea, Peter, and I thank you for the call. My view is that Paul Nuttall is a good chap. I've known him a long time. He's had a very tough couple of weeks. He is the right guy to lead the party. I think the party needs to be a little bit less metropolitan than one or two aspects of it currently are, and it needs to be a radical party. So I was in Washington on Saturday. I visited the White House on Saturday afternoon and caught up with some people there that I know. And I got delayed. I missed my flight. And I was in my Trump hotel with a member of staff having a drink. And there's a commotion. And in comes Donald Trump and says to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm staying here. You told me these hotels were good." He said, "Well, you better come and join us for dinner." So I did. And I won't tell you a single word of what was said at that dinner because I believe in confidentiality. But I will tell you this, that for a guy who is under the most extraordinary pressure and barriers, people trying to stop him doing what he wants to do, what I saw was a man of extraordinary moral courage. Yes, he believes it's his duty, as he was elected as president, to put those policies into action. And I have to say that people compare him to, is he another Ronnie Reagan? No, he's more of a Margaret Thatcher. He's driven and he wants to do these things. And he was, I have to tell you, in the most extraordinary form. He was witty, he was humorous, and he is a very, very, brave man. Like him, dislike him, I promise you, Trump's a good guy. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow evening at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. Up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you, Nigel. A Conservative MP has apologised after claiming disability benefits should go to really disabled people rather than those who are taking pills at home who suffer from anxiety. So do the rules need reforming? We'll talk about that. Plus, Sir John Major has warned tonight in a speech in London that Britons are being offered an unreal and over-optimistic vision of what Brexit will look like. And at 9, it's the Consumer Hour. Dean Dunham joins me to answer your consumer questions.